Hey everyone, it's Nathan with Crown & Caliber, and today we're going to make a case for the dress watch. Now, a little bit of context. We recently did a video where we did a buying guide on the Cartier tank, and then that got us thinking about dress watches. And we had two kind of eye-opening realizations. First off, not everybody has a need for a dress watch. And then secondarily, and probably most importantly, a dress watch implies the second or third or fourth or even further down the line in a collection of watches. And most people probably will not have a luxury watch collection. And let's be honest, luxury watch collections cost a lot of money. So we sat down and started to think of watches that could play both roles. And maybe they're not as elegant as, say, the Calatrava, or as rugged as something like a Seamaster Planet Ocean chronograph, but they sit in the middle and they do it well. They work as an everyday watch, and they can also work as a dress watch. So today, we're gonna make a case for the dress watch. So for starters, we think it's important to kind of give a definition of what traditionally a dress watch is and traditionally a sport or tool watch. So a dress watch is something that is often going to be smaller in size, going to be thin, needs to be able to slide under a shirt cuff, probably time only, precious metal. Ultimately, it feels like it's an accessory to a suit, something that is gonna be at an event like a wedding. Now, on the other side, you have something like a sport watch or a tool watch, and often they are larger. They are more robust. They are designed to take a beating per se, and often they do have something other than time only. They may have a complication that serves another purpose. So the watches we are looking at today kind of fit in that middle ground. Some have complications, some may be time only, but I think what's important is they fit into this parameter of size as well. None of them are too thin. I think the thinnest is about 8.5 millimeters, and the thickest is about 12.5 millimeters. And size-wise, we're looking at roughly about 32 to 39 millimeters. So today, we are gonna be looking at 4 examples of watches that we think play that middle ground. They definitely work as an everyday watch, but they have that ability to be a dress watch. And hopefully these examples that we found kind of give you some of those parameters if you are searching for a watch to be an everyday watch that can also be a dress watch. So let's get started. So the first watch that we're gonna look at today is the Breitling Navitimer Montbrillant. And the reason we chose this watch is because it is actually a good bit smaller than a traditional Navitimer. The Montbrillant comes in at 38 millimeters, and it's right around 12.5 millimeters thick. This is a great watch though because it does have some of those sportier characteristics. It has a chronograph. Like most Navitimers, it has a slide rule, so you get a lot of functionality in the watch. But because of that slightly smaller case size, it can wear well in a myriad of situations. On top of that, something traditional with a Navitimer is it is almost completely dial, which is generally thought of as something you see in dress watches. So it has that going for it. It also has a lot of high polished surfaces, which personally I think does kind of trend toward the more elegant side of things. And you can see here a Montbrillant on a bracelet. You can see it on a much more casual rubber strap, and it can also be had on a leather strap. So it is a great watch for being an everyday example, maybe on a bracelet or a rubber strap. And then in the evening, you go ahead and you put it on a leather strap, and it works just as well with a suit. And that 12.5 millimeters is still thin enough to slide under a dress cuff. The next watch that we're gonna look at is the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra. Now, first and foremost, the Aqua Terra is still very much a Seamaster. It still has that sport watch heritage. It has a screw-down crown. It has lugs reminiscent of a Seamaster Professional and even a Speedmaster, so it has kind of those Omega sport watch characteristics. Now, where it differs is it doesn't have a unidirectional rotating bezel. Instead, it has a much more proportionally thinner, just flat bezel. It has, I think, a cleaner dial, and it is a thinner case design. So you ultimately end up with a more refined and elegant design. But because it has a lot of that sport heritage and characteristic, it works as an everyday watch, but you can easily throw it on if you are wearing a suit. I think another point worth mentioning is the size. Right here we have a 39 millimeter example, and then we have a 36 millimeter example. So it is, again, a slightly smaller watch in that regard as well. And a last point worth mentioning about both of these Aqua Terras is they are perfect watches to put on a strap. So whether it is dressing down with something like a NATO or a Perlon, you could easily then put it on a leather strap and kind of dress it back up for an evening out. So that is our second watch, the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra. So the next watch that we're going to look at is from the brand Nomos. And it's not necessarily one watch, but it started with the Minimatik and then continues through the Neomatik. Now, Nomos as a brand has a pretty, I'll say, austere, kind of reserved style, but something kind of changed with the release of the Neomatik and the Minimatik is you get splashes of color. So taking a look at these two Nomos watches, they're definitely more of the kind of traditional classic dress watch look. They are thinner cases, not nearly as thin, I would say, as that kind of traditional dress watch we talked about, but they are slender cases, very thin bezels, almost entirely dial. But I think what allows them to be more casual and be easily an everyday watch is the fact that they do have playful dials. There's a good bit of color in there, from blues to reds to oranges. They just kind of have a playful tendency to them. And that works if you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I think another step is the straps on these watches. These are shell Cordovan, and that is a special type of leather that comes from the hindquarters of a horse, and it is a highly resistant leather when it comes to moisture and wear. And I think that speaks to Nomos saying, hey, these are meant to be worn every day. They can resist the day-to-day, moisture of your wrist or just sweat of your wrist, as kind of silly as that sounds. So a watch that on first appearance may seem more dressy definitely works as an everyday watch, and definitely in a different way than, say, the Montbrillant and the Aqua Terra. So there you go, the Nomos Minimatik and the Neomatik. So the last watch that we're going to highlight today is the Cartier Santos. Now, at the beginning of this video, we mentioned that the entire idea for a watch that can play both roles came from doing a buying guide on the Cartier tank. But we think that the Cartier Santos is a perfect example of kind of the duality between casual and dress. And there are a few reasons why. For starters, the Cartier Santos has a bracelet, and bracelet definitely makes a watch seem more casual. And then taking it a step further is that bracelet design on the Cartier Santos. It has exposed screws, and that adds this kind of exposed utilitarian design element to the watch. And then moving on to the bezel not only has the same exposed screw kind of utilitarian design to it, but it has a more prominent bezel, proportionally speaking. And earlier on, we've mentioned how a lot of these watches have had thinner bezels, which make it seem maybe a little bit more elegant. Whereas here with the Cartier Santos, to kind of pull it from the elegant into the rugged, it has a more prominent bezel. So Cartier has taken a classic, maybe more rectangular design and made it more casual, more rugged, as we've said, and allows it to play both roles, play that duality that we talk about, where it can be a casual watch on a bracelet and then slip under a cuff on a leather strap when you're wearing a suit. All right, so to wrap up our case for the dress watch, we kind of think of it as two approaches. You can approach it from the more sporty side, like the Montbrillant and the Aqua Terra, and bring in some of the more kind of reserved, elegant design cues of a dress watch. Or you can approach it from the more kind of dress, elegant side, like the Nomos and the Cartier, and bring in some of those more casual or rugged design elements. Ultimately, these are just some examples of watches that we think do a really great job of being a casual, everyday watch that can be dressed up. Go ahead, let us know in the comments below watches that you think are perfect for that duality, the casual everyday watch that can also be dressed up. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.